Congresswoman Omar, if Somalia and America went to war tomorrow, hypothetically, which side would you want to win? The voice asking the question was calm, measured, almost gentle. Vice President J.D. Vance leaned forward slightly in his chair, hands folded, waiting. 15 seconds of silence on live television in front of 2,000 people at the Target Center in Minneapolis. 15 seconds where United States Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, representing Minnesota's 5th District, could not say the words, "I'd want America to win." You could hear everything in that silence, someone's phone hitting the floor somewhere in the upper rows. The clatter echoed, the hum of the HVAC system, a cough from the back that seemed impossibly loud. 2,000 people holding their breath. Ilhan Omar opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Her eyes darted to Jake Tapper, the CNN moderator, like he could save her. He couldn't. Her communications director in the front row had his head in his hands. That question, her voice was shaking now, that question is designed to trap me. Vance didn't raise his voice. He just leaned forward another inch. It's only a trap if you can't answer it honestly. And that's when she stood up, reached behind her back, and started pulling off her microphone pack. The technical team winced as the connection popped, and static crackled through the speakers. "Congresswoman, we still have 20 minutes." Jake Tapper was half standing, trying to salvage the town hall. But Ilhan Omar was done. She dropped the microphone on her chair and walked toward stage right. No explanation, no final statement, just the side curtain swallowing her whole as she disappeared into the wings. The camera stayed on the empty chair. On Vance, sitting calmly, hands still folded. On Tapper, looking at his producers with an expression that said, "What the hell just happened?" Vance turned to face the camera directly. His voice was matter-of-fact, almost disappointed. "I think we have our answer. But to understand how we got here, how a sitting congresswoman's career imploded in under 2 hours on national television, you need to go back 90 minutes earlier, when Ilhan Omar walked into that arena thinking this was going to be her night. Thursday night, January 2026. Target Center, downtown Minneapolis. Temperature outside was 11 degrees, snow falling lightly on Hennepin Avenue. Inside, the arena was packed wall to wall with 2,000 people who'd been lining up since 4 in the afternoon. CNN had been promoting this town hall for 2 weeks straight. America's Future, a dialogue on national identity. The promotional spots showed split-screen images of Vance and Omar with the tagline, "Two visions, one conversation." The network knew what it had: the sitting vice president and one of the most polarizing members of Congress, face-to-face for the first time since their Twitter wars the previous year. This was ratings gold. The format was deliberately intimate. No podiums, no distance. Just 2 chairs on a mostly empty stage, maybe 6 feet apart, with Jake Tapper on a stool slightly off to the side. CNN wanted this to feel like a real conversation, not a debate. They wanted to see faces. They wanted to catch every micro-expression. The crowd split was visible from the moment you walked in. The left side of the arena was a sea of progressive signage, handmade posters that said "Squad Goals" and "Ilhan Speaks Truth" and "No Human is Illegal." Young people, mostly college-aged, many wearing keffiyehs in solidarity. They'd come to support their champion. The right side was pure MAGA. Red hats everywhere, American flag jackets, shirts that said "Trump Vance 2024, even though this was 2026. Middle-aged and older, mostly. They'd driven in from the suburbs and exurbs, some from as far as 2 hours away. They'd come to watch Omar get taken down. The energy in the room was electric and hostile. These two groups fundamentally disagreed about what America was, what it should be, who belonged in it. They were forced into the same space for 2 hours. The air crackled with potential confrontation. Backstage, 90 minutes before airtime, Ilhan Omar was in her dressing room with her team. There were 6 of them crowded into a space meant for 3. Her communications director, Marcus, her press secretary, Jen, 2 legislative aides, and her chief of staff, Ahmed. They'd been prepping for this all week. "He's going to come at you on Israel," Marcus said, flipping through note cards. "That's his base's biggest issue with you. Be ready for the IPAC question, the dual loyalty stuff." Omar was checking her makeup in the mirror, adjusting her hijab. She'd chosen the colors carefully, red, white, and blue in a subtle pattern. Patriotic, without being pandering. "I've answered those questions 1,000 times. Let him try." "What about the Somalia votes?" one of the legislative aides asked. "The sanctions bill from last year?" "That bill was garbage," Omar said dismissively. "Poorly written, would have hurt civilians. I'll explain the policy if he brings it up." Ahmed, her chief of staff, looked worried. "Just remember, this isn't a policy seminar. It's TV. Sound bites matter more than nuance." "I know how to do TV," Omar said. She'd been doing it for years now. Cable news hits, Sunday shows, late-night comedy programs. She was good at this, better than most of her colleagues. She could think on her feet, craft a message, control an interview. "Remember," Jen added, "he's going to try to bait you. Don't take it. Stay calm. Stay on message. You're the hometown hero here. Minneapolis loves you. This is your house." Omar smiled at that. It was true. She'd won her district by 30 points in the last election. These were her people. Well, half the arena anyway. The other half would hate her no matter what she said. But she didn't need to win them over. She just needed to not lose the middle. 30 minutes, a production assistant called through the door. Omar stood up, smoothed her dress, took a deep breath. "Let's do this." 3 floors up in a different dressing room, J.D. Vance sat alone except for his chief of staff, Tom, and a single Secret Service agent by the door. No crowd, no energy, just quiet focus. Tom was going through a binder, a thick one. "We've got everything," he said. "Tweets going back to 2012. Every vote related to Somalia, Al-Shabaab, foreign policy in the Horn of Africa, transcripts from community events. The fundraiser audio is queued up and verified." "And we're certain about the audio?" Vance asked. "It's her. It's authentic. It'll hold up. Verified by 3 independent sources. We have the metadata, the original file, everything. It's ironclad." Vance nodded slowly. He wasn't nervous exactly, but he was focused in that way trial lawyers get before a big cross-examination. He'd spent 20 minutes before this just sitting quietly, visualizing how the conversation would flow. Question by question, response by response. Where she'd try to dodge, how he'd redirect. "The key is patience," Tom said. "Don't rush. Build the case piece by piece. Let the audience see the pattern before you ask the final question." "I know," Vance said. "It's like a closing argument. You can't start with the verdict. You have to walk them through the evidence." "CNN doesn't know about the audio," Tom continued. "They'll be as surprised as everyone else. It might piss off Tapper." "Let him be pissed," Vance said. "It's authentic. It's newsworthy. He can't complain about that." Someone called. Vance stood, buttoned his suit jacket, checked his appearance in the mirror one last time. He looked calm, presidential even. That was intentional. He needed to be the adult in the room, the serious one. The prosecutor, not the politician. "One more thing," Tom said as they headed for the door. "If she walks off, and she might, don't gloat. Don't celebrate. Just let it speak for itself." "I won't need to," Vance said. "The silence will say everything." The arena lights dimmed at exactly 7:00 p.m. Eastern, 9:00 p.m. local time. The crowd noise dropped to a murmur of anticipation. Then Jake Tapper walked out onto the stage to applause that was polite but not enthusiastic. He was the referee. Nobody cheers for the referee. "Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this CNN Town Hall," Tapper began. "Tonight we have a truly unique opportunity. For the first time, Vice President J.D. Vance and Congresswoman Ilhan Omar will sit down together for an extended conversation about national identity, patriotism, and what it means to be American in 2026. He explained the format. 2 hours. He'd ask questions, they'd respond. Then they could engage with each other. In the second half, audience questions, ground rules, be respectful, let each other finish. No personal attacks. "Please welcome Congresswoman Ilhan Omar," Tapper said. The left side of the arena exploded. Standing ovation, cheers, applause that went on for a solid 30 seconds. Omar emerged from stage left, waving, smiling. That confident campaign smile. She was wearing a navy dress with her patriotic hijab, and she moved across the stage with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She shook Tapper's hand, waved to the crowd again, and sat down in her chair. The right side of the arena had been dead silent during her entrance. Now they waited. "And please welcome Vice President J.D. Vance." The right side erupted. The left side stayed seated, many with arms crossed. Vance walked out from stage right, waving briefly, but not playing to the crowd. He was all business. He shook Tapper's hand, nodded once to Omar. She nodded back, formal and cold, and sat down in his chair. 6 feet apart, close enough to see every expression clearly. The stage lights were bright and hot. There was nowhere to hide. "Let's begin," Tapper said. "I want to start with a fundamental question for both of you. What does patriotism mean to you? Congresswoman Omar, let's start with you." Omar shifted slightly in her chair, turned to face Tapper and the camera. This was her wheelhouse. She'd given versions of this answer dozens of times. "Jake, I think about my journey to this country. I was born in Mogadishu, Somalia. When I was 8 years old, civil war forced my family to flee. We spent 4 years in a refugee camp in Kenya. 4 years where we didn't know if we'd ever have a home again. And then America opened her doors to us." Her voice was strong, practiced, hitting all the emotional beats. "This country gave me everything. An education, opportunities my parents never dreamed of, the chance to serve in Congress. That's what I mean when I say I love America. I love her because she gave me the opportunity to fight for justice, to demand that we live up to our ideals." The progressive side applauded. Omar continued, "And I think patriotism means being willing to criticize the things we need to fix. It means demanding better. It means not settling for injustice just because we're grateful. Love and criticism aren't opposites, they're partners. I criticize America because I love what she can be." More applause from the left. The right side remained stone-faced. This was exactly the answer they expected, the answer they hated. This idea that patriotism meant constant criticism, constant focus on America's failures. "Vice President Vance?" Tapper asked. Vance took a breath, seemed to gather his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than Omar's, more conversational. "My grandmother raised me in Middletown, Ohio. My mother struggled with addiction most of my adult life. We didn't have much money. There were times growing up when I wasn't sure where the next meal was coming from." He paused. "But I had something that people in most countries don't have. A chance. I could join the Marines. I could go to college on the GI Bill. I could go to law school. I could write a book about my experiences and have people actually read it." He looked directly at Omar for the first time. "I think patriotism is recognizing that whatever America's flaws, and she has them, I'm not blind to that, she's given all of us something precious. A system that's imperfect, but that allows us to improve it. And I think patriotism means acknowledging that when we criticize America, we need to remember. Compared to what? Compared to other countries? Compared to other systems? America isn't perfect, but she's given more people more opportunity than any nation in human history." The right side applauded, not as loud as the left had for Omar, but sustained. "I appreciate the Congresswoman's journey," Vance continued. "I can't imagine what her family went through, but I think at some point we have to ask, does America get credit for taking you in, for giving you that chance? Or is the focus always going to be on what's wrong?" And there it was, the first hint of tension. Omar's expression tightened slightly. Tapper jumped in before she could respond. "Let's talk about that balance. How do we honor America's achievements while acknowledging its failures?" The next 15 minutes were policy discussions. Healthcare, education, immigration reform. Both gave standard answers. Omar talked about systemic racism and the need for fundamental change. Vance talked about opportunity and personal responsibility. They disagreed on everything, but in predictable ways. The audience was getting restless. This wasn't the fireworks CNN had promised. 23 minutes into the town hall, Vance shifted in his seat. He'd been nodding along politely while Omar talked about immigration policy, but when she finished, he didn't respond to her point. Instead, he turned to Tapper. "Jake, can I ask the Congresswoman about something different?" Tapper looked slightly thrown. They were supposed to be following his questions. Sure. What would you like to ask about?" Vance turned to face Omar directly. "I'd like to ask about Somalia." The temperature in the room changed. You could feel it. Omar's smile froze for just a half-second, just long enough for anyone watching closely to notice. Tapper seemed uncertain. "Somalia? I mean, if the Congresswoman is comfortable." "Of course," Omar said quickly, recovering. "What do you want to know?" Vance's tone was conversational, almost gentle. "Nothing complicated. I'm just trying to understand your perspective. You were born in Mogadishu, came here as a child. That must have been incredibly difficult. Civil war, refugee camp, displacement. I can't imagine what your family endured." "It was hard," Omar said carefully. She wasn't sure where this was going. "And you've lived in America now for what, about 33 years? Most of your life?" "Yes, America is my home." Notice that. America is my home. Present tense. Definitive. Hold on to that line, because in about 45 minutes, Vance was going to play her saying something very different. "I appreciate you saying that," Vance said, "and I want to make sure I understand your relationship to both countries, Somalia and America, because I think the American people deserve to understand it, given that you represent them in Congress. You speak for them. You vote on their behalf." Tapper was looking between them, sensing this was going somewhere but not sure where. "Mr. Vice President, what exactly are you asking?" Vance kept his eyes on Omar. "I'm asking about identity, about loyalty, about which country she considers home, because I think that matters when you're making decisions that affect American foreign policy, American security, American interests." Omar's voice took on an edge. I think you're suggesting that because I was born in Somalia, I can't be fully American. That's the kind of— I'm not suggesting anything, Vance interrupted gently. I'm asking questions, and I'd like to ask them directly, if that's okay. Go ahead, Omar said. Her team backstage was suddenly alert, leaning forward. This wasn't the Israel line of attack they'd prepared for. Vance pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. A simple gesture, but it changed the dynamic. This wasn't off the cuff. He'd come prepared. Congresswoman, in 2012, when the United States was conducting drone operations in Somalia targeting al-Shabaab, you tweeted something. I have it here. He looked at his phone. Why is the U.S. killing our brothers in Somalia? Do you remember that tweet? Omar nodded slowly. I remember speaking out about civilian casualties. Drone strikes were killing innocent people. I'm sure they were, Vance said, and that's a legitimate concern. But I'm asking about specific language. The word our. You wrote our brothers. Who did you mean by our? There was a pause. 3 seconds, maybe 4. The audience could feel the trap being laid, but Omar hadn't figured out how to step around it yet. Think about her options. If she says our meant Somali, she's identifying as Somali first, not American. If she says our meant humans in general, then why only Somalia? Why not, why is the U.S. killing people in Somalia? Why the possessive our? If she says our meant Muslim brothers, that opens up entirely different problems. I was expressing compassion for people suffering, Omar said. By calling them our brothers, Vance pressed. Not the Somali people, not civilians. The specific phrase was our brothers. That's language of kinship, of belonging. I'm asking who you were including yourself with when you wrote that. 10 seconds of silence. Now Omar was calculating. The progressive side of the audience was starting to shift in their seats because they could see what Vance was doing. This wasn't about policy. This was about identity, about loyalty, about whether Omar saw herself as American or Somali when push came to shove. I think you're trying to suggest that because I was born in Somalia, I can't have compassion for people there without it somehow meaning I'm not loyal to America. Vance didn't raise his voice. Congresswoman, I haven't questioned your loyalty. I've asked about a pronoun, a 2-letter word. If the question itself feels like an attack on your loyalty, that might tell us something. But I'm just asking what our meant. Who were you identifying with? Tapper tried to interject. I think we can move on to— Jake, with respect, Vance said, still looking at Omar. I'd like an answer first. The audience was leaning forward now. Even the progressive side could sense that Omar was struggling with this. It shouldn't be a hard question, but somehow it was. I was expressing solidarity with people who were suffering, Omar said finally. Solidarity, Vance repeated, by calling them our brothers, like they're your family, like you're one of them. Omar's voice rose slightly. I am one of them. I'm Somali American. I can be both. Exactly, Vance said, and he nodded. Thank you for saying that. You're Somali American, both. Let's remember that. He didn't press further, didn't gloat, just moved on, asking Tapper a question about economic policy. But he'd gotten what he needed. Omar saying, I am one of them, on the record. The first piece of evidence in place. The next 10 minutes were about tax policy. Boring stuff. Vance let Omar talk, nodding occasionally, disagreeing politely. He seemed to have forgotten about the Somalia question entirely. The audience relaxed slightly. Maybe that was it. Maybe he'd made his point and was moving on. But Omar's team backstage wasn't relaxed. Because they knew Vance was a lawyer. And lawyers don't ask one question. They build cases. This was just the opening. Vance waited until Omar had finished a long answer about corporate tax rates. She seemed to have regained her confidence. Then he circled back. Congresswoman, since we're talking about your record, I want to ask about a specific vote. September 2023. There was a bill in Congress, H.R. 4772, to impose sanctions on Somali government officials with documented ties to al-Shabaab. Do you remember that vote? Omar's expression tightened. I remember the bill. Yes. It was pretty straightforward. 15 named individuals, Somali government officials and military officers who had been proven to have connections to al-Shabaab. Working with them, taking money from them, providing them protection. The bill said we should freeze their U.S. assets, ban them from traveling here. Pretty basic stuff. The bill passed 412 to 3. You were one of the 3 no votes. Why? This was different from a tweet. This was congressional record. Public. Documented. There was no ambiguity about what she'd done. That bill was poorly constructed, Omar said. Her voice had that defensive edge again. It would have created humanitarian problems. The sanctions regime it proposed was too broad. The bill specifically named 15 individuals, Vance interrupted. I have the list here if you'd like me to read it. It wasn't broad. It was targeted. These 15 people. That's it. And you voted to protect them from consequences. Why? Because sanctions don't work in isolation, Omar said. And she was talking faster now, more animated. You can't just target individuals without considering the broader economic impact on civilian populations. Somalia is one of the poorest countries in the world. Any sanctions create ripple effects. Congresswoman, Vance's voice was patient but firm. Al-Shabaab has killed American soldiers. They massacred students at Garissa University in Kenya. 148 people, mostly students, executed for being Christian. They've bombed hotels, marketplaces, aid workers. They're designated terrorists by the United States, the UN, the African Union, and 15 Somali officials were proven to be working with them. The bill didn't target civilians, it targeted those 15 people, and you voted to protect them. I want to understand why. Omar took a breath. She was about to launch into an explanation about IMF impacts and humanitarian corridors and the complexity of sanctions regimes. But Vance held up a hand. Actually, let me ask a simpler question first. Do you believe the United States should sanction government officials who work with al-Shabaab? It was a binary question. Yes or no? Should we punish people who work with terrorists? It's more complicated than should we or shouldn't we. Yes or no? If the sanctions are properly designed, Congresswoman, these were properly designed. 15 names, specific people, frozen assets, travel bans. Should we have sanctioned them? Yes or no? She couldn't say yes, because she'd voted no. But she couldn't say no, because that meant defending people who worked with terrorists. So she went with option 3, complexity. I think we need to consider the full context of sanctions policy in fragile states. The audience was losing her. Even the progressive side could see she was dodging. When you need 2 minutes to explain why you voted to protect terror-connected officials, you've already lost the argument. Vance let her talk. He didn't interrupt. He just waited until she ran out of steam, until her explanation wound down into academic jargon about institutional capacity and governance structures. So, you voted no, he said simply when she finished. You voted to protect 15 Somali officials with proven ties to Al-Shabaab. We'll hold that thought. He turned to Tapper. Jake, I think we can move on. The next 15 minutes were about climate policy, then education, then briefly back to healthcare. Normal town hall stuff. Omar was finding her rhythm again. She was good at this. Policy discussions, explaining her positions. She could do this in her sleep. And then Vance brought up 2019. Congresswoman, I want to ask you about something you said a few years ago. Do you remember in 2019 when you made comments about certain members of Congress having allegiance to a foreign country? Omar's face changed. This was dangerous territory. The accusations of anti-Semitism, the controversy that had nearly derailed her first term. That was about AIPAC and campaign finance, she said immediately. It was taken out of context. I'm not asking about AIPAC, Vance said. I'm asking about the concept. The specific phrase you used was, I want to talk about the political influence that says it is okay to push for allegiance to a foreign country. You were talking about some of your colleagues, suggesting they had divided loyalties between America and Israel. Do you remember saying that? Yes, but the context was… So you believed it was possible, Vance continued, his voice still calm, still patient. You believed it was possible for a member of Congress, an American citizen, someone who took an oath of office, to have their allegiance compromised by ties to another country. You believed that strongly enough to publicly accuse colleagues of it, correct? This was surgical. He wasn't accusing her of anything yet. He was just getting her to establish the principle, getting her to agree that dual loyalty was a real thing that could really happen to real members of Congress. I think, Omar was choosing her words carefully now, I think people can have complex relationships with multiple places. And yes, sometimes financial interests or political pressure can create divided loyalties. Divided loyalties, Vance repeated. Good phrase. So, you've established in your own words, based on your own accusations against others, that it's possible for an American politician to have divided loyalties between the United States and another country, in certain circumstances, involving financial influence. Is it possible for you to have divided loyalties between America and Somalia? The room went dead silent. Not murmuring, not whispers, complete silence. Because he'd just used her own framework, her own accusation that she'd made against Jewish members of Congress, and turned it directly back on her. Omar's mouth opened, closed. I don't think that's a fair comparison. Why not? Vance's tone was genuinely curious, not hostile. You set the standard. You said divided loyalty is real and concerning. You accused others of it. I'm asking if the same standard applies to you. If it's possible that you have divided loyalties between the country you were born in and the country you serve. I've never taken money from the Somali government. I didn't say you did. I didn't mention money. I asked if you have divided loyalties because you voted against sanctioning Somali officials who work with terrorists. You've referred to Somalis as our brothers, identifying with them rather than Americans. And we're about to hear you say something even more revealing about where your heart really is. Omar's communications director backstage had his phone out, texting frantically. Her press secretary was pacing. They could see where this was going now. They knew what was coming, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Vance reached down beside his chair and picked up a tablet. The movement was casual, but every camera in the arena followed it. Congresswoman, I want to play something for the audience. This is audio from a fundraiser you held in Minneapolis on August 19, 2023. Small event, maybe 60 people, all Somali American donors. You were speaking in English, asking for contributions to help you push certain foreign policy priorities. You thought it was a private event, just community. But someone recorded it. Omar's face went white, actually drained of color. She leaned over to her communications director in the front row and whispered something urgent. He shook his head. "We don't know what audio this is. We don't have it." Jake Tapper looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Vice President, if this is some kind of gotcha..." "It's not a gotcha, Jake. It's her own words. We verified the audio. We have the original file, the metadata, everything. It's authentic." "Congresswoman, would you like to tell everyone what you said at that fundraiser, or should I just play it?" "I don't know what you're referring to." "Then let's listen." Vance tapped the tablet. There was a moment of silence. Then Omar's voice came through the arena speakers. Crystal clear. No question it was her. Same tone, same cadence, same slight accent. "Look, I know I have to be careful about how I say things publicly. The media twists everything, right? They take one sentence and make it into something it's not. But we're family here. We're community. We understand each other. And you all know, you know where my heart is. It's back home. It's with our people, who are still suffering, who are still struggling under a government that the U.S. props up, that doesn't care about them, that serves foreign interests instead of Somali interests. That's why I ran for Congress, not to wave the American flag and pretend everything is perfect here, not to just go along with whatever Washington wants. I'm there to fight for Tyrese, for our people, for the community, and I won't apologize for that." The audio ended. Total silence in the arena. You could hear the ventilation system. Someone in the upper deck coughed, and it echoed like a gunshot. 2,000 people sat frozen, processing what they'd just heard. Jake Tapper was looking at his producers off camera, his expression somewhere between shock and anger. "Did we know about this?" The producers were shaking their heads. "Back home." Vance's voice cut through the silence. Clinical, almost detached. "Not where I came from, not my ancestral homeland, not the country my parents left. Back home. Present tense, like Somalia is still home, after 33 years in America, after 7 years in Congress." Omar found her voice, but it was shaking now. "That audio is edited." "It's not," Vance was firm. "I have the full 9-minute recording. We've had it analyzed by 3 independent audio forensics experts. It's authentic. No edits, no splices, no manipulation. Those are your words. Would you like me to play the full recording? Because it gets worse." She didn't answer. She was staring at the table in front of her, at her hands, at anything except Vance or the cameras. "Our people," Vance continued. "You said that twice in the clip we just heard. I'm there to fight for us. Congresswoman, when you said us, when you're sitting in the United States Congress, having sworn an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, who is us? Who are our people? Because it doesn't sound like you meant Americans. You're taking this out of context." Her voice was desperate. "What context makes back home mean anything other than home? What context makes our people mean anyone other than Somalis? You weren't talking about Americans. You were talking to Somali Americans about Somalis back in Somalia. And you called Somalia back home, not America. Somalia." The progressive side of the audience was squirming now, because there was no spin for this. No way to explain it away. Those were her words, in her voice, unambiguous. "Back home. Our people. Fight for us." Vance leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Let's review what we've established. You referred to Somalis as our brothers, using language of kinship and belonging. You voted against sanctioning 15 Somali officials with proven ties to al-Shabaab, even though 412 of your colleagues voted yes. You accused other members of Congress of dual loyalty, establishing that divided allegiance is a real and legitimate concern. And now we've heard you tell Somali American donors that your heart is back home in Somalia and that you're in Congress to fight for our people, meaning Somalis. He paused. Let it sink in. So I'm going to ask you directly, Congresswoman, do you have divided loyalties between America and Somalia? Omar's hands were gripping the arms of her chair. I don't accept that framing. It's your framing. You used it against others. You established the standard. Yes or no? Do you have divided loyalties? She couldn't say yes. That would end her career on the spot. But she couldn't say no because it contradicted everything the audience had just heard. So she tried option 3, attacking the question itself. I think this is an Islamophobic line of questioning that suggests Muslims can't be fully American. I haven't mentioned your religion once, Vance said. I haven't mentioned your race. I haven't mentioned your hijab or your faith or anything about Islam. I've talked about your words and your votes. If asking about loyalty to America is Islamophobic, then patriotism itself is Islamophobic. Is that what you believe? She had no answer. She sat there, mouth opening and closing, no words coming out. Tapper tried to step in. I think maybe we should take a break. But Vance wasn't done. One more thing, Jake. There's someone in the audience tonight who I think has something to say about this. And that's when someone in the audience stood up. Row 12, left side, progressive section. A woman, maybe 50 years old, wearing a hijab and a long coat. She stood up slowly, like it took every ounce of courage she had. Congresswoman Omar. Her voice was quiet at first, but it carried. The arena was so silent that even a whisper would have echoed. Omar looked up, and you could see it. Instant recognition. Her eyes went wide. She knew this woman. My name is Fatima Hassan. The woman's voice was stronger now. I volunteered on your first campaign in 2016. I knocked on doors for you in the snow. I drove people to the polls who didn't have cars. I made phone calls. I donated money I didn't really have to donate. I believed in you. The cameras swiveled to her. The entire arena was focused on this one woman standing in the progressive section. Other Somali Americans nearby were nodding. They knew her. They knew this was real. My husband was killed in Mogadishu in 1991. Fatima's voice was shaking but clear. His name was Hassan Abdi. He was a teacher. He taught mathematics at a high school. Warlords came to the school demanding money, demanding loyalty, demanding that the school teach their propaganda. My husband refused, so they shot him in front of his students because he wouldn't bow to criminals. She paused, gathering strength. Those warlords became al-Shabaab. The same men who killed my husband are the same organization that controls parts of Somalia today. That's why we fled. That's why we spent 4 years in Kakuma refugee camp. That's why we came to America. Because Somalia failed us. Because the government there was either unwilling or unable to protect people like my husband. Because we needed a country that had rule of law. Her voice was getting louder now, more forceful. This country gave us everything. My children went to school here. My daughter graduated from the University of Minnesota. She's a nurse now at Abbott Northwestern Hospital. My son is studying engineering at Minnesota State. America did that, not Somalia. Somalia took my husband. America gave us a future. Omar tried to interrupt. Fatima, I understand your pain, but no. Fatima's voice cut through. You don't understand. Because you stand there and call Somalia home. You vote to protect Somali officials who work with Al-Shabaab, the same organization that came from the warlords who killed my husband. You say you're in Congress to fight for us, for our people. But you don't speak for me. You don't speak for us. She gestured around her. At least 40 Somali Americans in that section were nodding. Some had tears in their eyes. We came to America because we chose America, Fatima continued. We took oaths of citizenship. We pledged allegiance. We meant it. When they ask us if we're American or Somali, we say American without hesitation, without qualification. American. Because that's what we are now. That's what we chose to be. She looked directly at Omar. Answer his question. America or Somalia? Just say it. Say America is your home. Say you'd choose America. That's all you have to do. Just say it. And then, one by one, people in that section started standing up. 5, then 10, then 20, then more. They weren't leaving. They were standing in solidarity with Fatima. Standing as Americans who chose America. Standing against Omar. These were her people, her community, her bae. Somali Americans who'd supported her, voted for her, defended her against attacks. And they were turning on her, publicly, on live television. Omar looked stricken. Fatima, please. Another voice from that section, a man this time, also standing. Just say, America, Ilhan. Why can't you just say it? Another woman. We can say it. Why can't you? Vance hadn't said a word during this. He just sat there watching. This wasn't him attacking anymore. This was her own community demanding answers. Tapper was looking panicked. I think we need to... But the voices kept coming. Say America. Choose America. Why won't you say it? Omar stood up suddenly, not to answer, to leave. This is a setup. This is coordinated. Fatima's voice cut through the chaos. Ilhan, I'm not coordinated. I'm not paid. I'm not part of some conspiracy. I'm just a member of your community asking you a simple question. Do you choose America or Somalia? Just answer. That's all. Omar was shaking her head, backing toward the edge of the stage. I'm not going to participate in this. Vance finally spoke. Congresswoman, you can leave if you want. But everyone here, everyone watching at home, will understand why you can't answer the question. Omar stopped, turned, looked at Vance with an expression of pure fury. You want me to participate in your racist show trial? I haven't mentioned your race, Vance said calmly. He didn't stand up, didn't raise his voice. I haven't mentioned your religion. I haven't mentioned where you were born or what you look like or anything about your identity except your own words and your own votes. If asking which country you'd choose, America or Somalia, is racist, then I don't know what patriotism means anymore. He stood now, not theatrically, just rose to his feet. Congresswoman, let me be very clear about what we've established tonight. He counted on his fingers. 1. You called Somalis our brothers, using language of kinship and identification. 2. You voted against sanctioning 15 Somali officials with proven ties to Al-Shabaab, even though 412 of your colleagues voted yes. 3. You accused other members of Congress of dual loyalty, establishing that divided allegiance is a real and legitimate concern. 4. You told donors in private that your heart is back home in Somalia and that you're in Congress to fight for our people, meaning Somalis. 5. Members of your own community. He gestured to the still-standing Somali Americans. are asking you the same question I'm asking." He paused. The arena was completely silent, except for the breathing of 2,000 people. "So, one last time, and I will accept whatever answer you give. Truly, I will. But you need to give an answer. If America and Somalia went to war tomorrow, hypothetically, a conflict between the two nations, which side would you want to win?" 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15. Omar's mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked at Tapper desperately. He couldn't help her. She looked at her team in the front row. They were frozen. She looked at the Somali Americans, still standing, still waiting for an answer. 20 seconds. 25. From the Somali American section. "Just say America." From someone else, "Why can't you say it?" From Fatima, still standing, her voice cutting through, "Ilhan, just say it." 4 words. "I'd choose America. That's all." 30 seconds now. The longest silence in television history. You could hear people breathing. Someone's phone was buzzing. A child in the upper deck said, "Mommy, why isn't she talking?" And it echoed. Omar's voice finally came out, shaking. That question is designed to trap me. It's only a trap if you can't answer honestly." Vance's voice was patient, almost kind. "Every American can answer this in 1 second. Every naturalized citizen has taken an oath affirming this. Every member of Congress has sworn to defend America against all enemies. This isn't a trick question. Which side would you want to win?" "I refuse to engage with this kind of—" "Why?" Vance asked simply. "Why can't you say, 'I'd want America to win'? It's 6 words. 6 words that every person in this arena, left side, right side, progressive, conservative, everyone, could say without hesitation. Why can't you?" Multiple voices now from the Somali American section. "Say it. Just say America. We can say it." And then something broke. You could see it in Omar's face. The exact moment when she realized she couldn't answer, couldn't spin, couldn't escape. She reached behind her back and yanked at her microphone pack. The technical crew winced as the connection popped, feedback screeching through the speakers for half a second. "I'm done," she said, her voice raw. "This is a setup. This is, Congresswoman, we still have—" Tapper was half standing, trying to save the town hall. But Omar was walking, striding toward stage right, toward the wings, still fumbling with the microphone pack. She got it off and dropped it on the stage with a clatter that echoed through the sound system. Vance called after her, not shouting, but clear, "You can leave, Congresswoman, but your silence has already answered the question." Omar didn't turn around. She kept walking. The side curtain opened and swallowed her. Gone. The camera stayed on the empty chair. On Vance, standing calmly, hands at his sides. On Tapper, looking completely lost. On the Somali Americans, still standing in row 12 and nearby seats. And then, slowly, they started walking out. Not all of them, but 20, maybe 30 people filing out of their rows, quietly, dignified. They weren't leaving in protest of Vance. They were leaving in protest of Omar. They'd come to support her. They were leaving because she couldn't say she'd choose America. Fatima was one of the last to leave. As she reached the aisle, she turned back toward the stage, toward the camera, and said clearly, "We chose America. We thought she did too." Tapper was trying to salvage something. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Vice President Vance will be here to take questions from the audience. The feed cut to commercial, but nobody was watching the rest of the show. Because within 60 seconds of Omar's walk-off, the clip was everywhere. Not the full 2-hour context, not the careful build-up. Just 17 seconds. Which side would you want to win? Silence. That question is designed to trap me. It's only a trap if you can't answer honestly. Omar ripping off mic and walking away. That 17-second clip posted on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, shared by conservative accounts immediately, but then picked up by mainstream sources, by political junkies across the spectrum, by people who'd never heard of Ilhan Omar. Within 2 hours, it had been viewed 20 million times. By morning, 50 million. The audio of her saying "back home" about Somalia, another viral clip. The image of Fatima standing, asking her to just say America, a third viral moment. But the one that really destroyed her was the simplest. Which side would you want to win? Followed by 15 seconds of silence, followed by her walking off stage. Because you didn't need context for that. You didn't need to understand Somalia policy or sanctions bills or dual loyalty accusations. You just needed to hear a simple question and watch a congresswoman unable to answer it. Friday morning, Omar's office released a statement. It was 3 paragraphs long, carefully worded, drafted, and redrafted by her communications team through the night. The statement called Vance's questioning Islamophobic and xenophobic. It said she'd been ambushed with bad faith gotcha questions designed to create viral moments rather than substantive dialogue. It claimed her loyalty to America had never been legitimately questioned by anyone familiar with her record of service. It did not include the words, "I would want America to win." Even in a written statement, with hours to craft the perfect response, with no cameras and no pressure and no time limit, she still didn't say it. The reaction was immediate and brutal. By Friday afternoon, the Minneapolis Star-Tribune had published an op-ed by a coalition of Somali American community leaders. The headline, "She doesn't speak for us." The piece was measured, careful, diplomatic in tone, but the message was clear. We came to America by choice. We became citizens by choice. We chose America. When someone asks us if we'd choose America or Somalia, we don't hesitate. We say, America. Most of us fled Somalia because it failed us. We don't understand why our congresswoman can't say the same thing. 3 Minneapolis mosques released a joint statement Friday evening. It was even more carefully worded, talking about how Islam and American patriotism are not in conflict. How Muslims serve in the military and government and take oaths of loyalty just like everyone else. The subtext was obvious. We can say it. Why can't she? I can't. Saturday morning, 2 Minnesota Democrats announced primary challenges to Omar. One was a Somali American state representative, a moderate. Her announcement video opened with her saying clearly, "I'm running because I believe in America. I chose this country, and I will always choose this country. No hesitation, no qualification, America." The squad, AOC, Rashida, Ayanna Pressley, the other progressive firebrands who'd been Omar's closest allies in Congress, said nothing. No statements of support, no tweets defending her, no appearances on cable news to explain the context. Just silence. That silence said everything. Sunday evening, internal polling from Omar's campaign leaked to the press. Her approval rating in her district had dropped 11 points since Thursday night, from 58% to 47% in 72 hours. Among Somali Americans specifically, her core base, the community she'd represented and drawn support from, her approval had cratered 17 points. The crosstabs were even more damning. When asked, "Do you believe Ilhan Omar would choose America over Somalia if forced to choose?" Only 34% of her own constituents said yes, 41% said no, 25% were unsure. Vance, meanwhile, didn't gloat, didn't tweet, didn't do a victory lap on Fox News or conservative podcasts. Saturday morning, his office released a statement. 2 sentences. I don't question Representative Omar's right to serve in Congress. I trust the voters of Minnesota's 5th District to decide whether someone who cannot clearly state their loyalty to America should represent them. That was it. No mockery. No dunking. No, I told you so. Just, I asked a question she couldn't answer. Voters will decide. Which somehow made it worse for Omar. Because he was being reasonable, presidential even. He hadn't attacked her faith or her background or her identity. He'd asked about loyalty, and she couldn't answer. The clip played on loop for days. Not just on conservative media, Fox News, Newsmax, right-wing podcasts, but on CNN, MSNBC, the network news broadcasts. Because it wasn't a partisan moment, it was a human moment. A moment where someone was asked a simple question and couldn't answer. Late-night comedians struggled with it. A few made jokes, but they rang hollow. Because, how do you make this funny? A sitting member of Congress asked if she'd want her country to win a hypothetical war, and she can't answer. What's the joke there? 2 weeks after the town hall, a poll showed that 63% of Americans, including 47% of Democrats, believed Omar should resign. Not because they all agreed with Vance's politics, but because they all agreed that if you can't say you'd choose America, you probably shouldn't represent America in Congress. People asked me for months afterward, was it fair? Was the question a trap? And here's what I think. It was only a trap if you couldn't answer it. Every naturalized citizen standing in a courtroom with their hand raised takes an oath of allegiance. They swear that they will support and defend the Constitution and laws of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They renounce their allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. That's not controversial. That's not xenophobic. That's what we ask of everyone who chooses to become American. Every member of Congress, native-born or naturalized, takes a similar oath. They swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Not some enemies, not domestic enemies only. All enemies, foreign and domestic. The question wasn't asking for perfection. It wasn't asking Omar to renounce her Somali heritage, or her faith, or her identity, or her compassion for people still living in Somalia. It was asking, if it came down to it, if there was a choice to be made between America's interests and Somalia's interests, which would you choose? And for 30 seconds on that stage in Minneapolis, she couldn't say America. She couldn't say it to Vance. She couldn't say it to Fatima Hassan, whose husband was killed in the country Omar called back home. She couldn't say it to the Somali Americans who stood up and asked her to just say it. She couldn't say it in her official statement the next day. She couldn't say it at all. That's what destroyed her political career. Not Vance's questions, not the evidence he presented, though that was damning. Not even the walk-off, though that created the viral moment. The silence, the inability to answer. The 30 seconds where a United States Congresswoman could not say she would choose the United States. Because if you can't say that, if you represent America in Congress, and you can't say you'd choose America, then what are you even doing there? 3 months later, Omar lost her primary. Not by a little. By 18 points. The largest margin of defeat for an incumbent member of Congress in Minnesota history. Her concession speech was brief. She talked about fighting for justice, about speaking truth to power, about how the forces of Islamophobia and racism had conspired against her. She still didn't say, "I would choose America." Maybe she never could. It wasn't the question that ended Ilhan Omar's career. It was the answer, or rather, the lack of one.